I woke up every day an hour before the alarm. Silently, without a sound. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, catching the rhythm of her breathing. She always slept deeply, peacefully, as if she had nothing to lose. And I was on guard. All our life, I had been on guard. Sometimes it felt like I wasn't living, but protecting her sleep, her peace, her comfort, and mine. Who even cared? She was always beautiful, too beautiful for me to feel equal to her. When we met, I blushed like a schoolboy. She laughed easily, confidently, looked straight into my eyes. And I believed that I could be someone for her. A strong shoulder, a safe shore, someone who wouldn't betray her, wouldn't fail her. We went through a lot together. Loans, renovation, loss. I worked like a mule, took night shifts, did everything to keep her from worrying. I built our home brick by brick, not just with concrete, but with trust, with belief that we were one. And she just lived in that home, comfortably, beautifully, indifferently. Over time, silence moved in between us. First, like a short pause, then, like a habit, and eventually, like a burden. She no longer asked how I was, didn't care if I was tired or hurting, and I got used to it. Because men don't complain, because men stay quiet. But what destroyed me most wasn't indifference. It was her gaze. There was no contempt in it, no, but there was no love either. Only emptiness. Like looking out a window at night and seeing only your own reflection. I felt like I was becoming a shadow in my own life. I brought home my paycheck, silently. Cooked dinner, silently. Listened to her talk about a new friend from work, silently. She didn't lie openly. She just didn't tell the truth. And I didn't ask, because I was afraid of the answer. Sometimes at night, I heard her texting quietly. I lay there, holding my breath, listening to her smile into the darkness. Not for me, not for us, for someone else. And each smile was a knife, not in the back, but in the soul. I started fading, not physically, spiritually. I was tired of being the silent hero, tired of swallowing my dignity like cold coffee left on the windowsill. I no longer believed this was temporary, that she would come to her senses, that we still had something to save. I stopped looking for myself in her eyes. There was no space for me there anymore. Only a foreign world I wasn't invited into. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. It was still dark. Her phone lay next to her, unlocked, maybe on purpose, or out of contempt. I didn't want to read, didn't want to find proof. But my fingers moved toward the screen on their own. And there it was. Hearts, photos, promises, calling someone else my love. Planned dinners while I worked late nights. Restaurants, messages like, "You're better than him. He doesn't notice me." I didn't feel pain. No, just emptiness. The same that was in her eyes, now in me. She woke up and saw me holding her phone. Froze. For a few seconds, like a predator caught. Then sat up, sighed, and said nothing. Just took the phone, as if it was hers. And I, as if I was no one. No shouting. No, it's not what it looks like. No guilt. Only silence. Heavy like concrete between us. I stood up, got dressed, and walked out. For the first time, without explanations. Without a be back soon. Without hope of fixing something that had long been broken. Outside, it was snowing. The first snow. White, quiet, like my pain. I walked with no purpose, but with a feeling that something inside me had broken. Completely. Or been born anew. I only returned in the evening. The key slid into the lock with the same softness with which my old life had crumbled in the silence of that morning. The apartment was dark. No lights, no sounds. Only a faint trace of her perfume in the air, like a memory of who she once was to me. She sat on the couch, legs crossed, just like she always did when she felt she was right. Her posture was perfect, straight back, eyes on the floor, arms folded. But I could see She wasn't waiting for explanations or forgiveness. She just wasn't waiting for anything. And maybe that was the scariest part. I walked past, took off my coat, hung it on the hook like I had done 100 times. But now every motion felt like an empty ritual. I was no longer part of this home. I had become a stranger in my own apartment, among the walls I painted myself, among the furniture we picked together in a showroom where she once laughed and called me her one and only. Are we going to talk? Her voice was quiet, without a trace of remorse, as if she wasn't talking about betrayal, but about forgetting to buy bread. I didn't answer right away. I sat at the table, placed a glass of water in front of me, like a shield, and only then looked at her. About what exactly? That I no longer exist for you, and you're already living another life. Just haven't moved out yet? She sighed, and in that sigh, there was everything: weariness, indifference, and a bit of irritation. Because you see, refused to stay silent. It's not as simple as you think. No, I said calmly. It's actually very simple. You cheated. I found out. Period. She lowered her head, touched her temple. That gesture she always made when she didn't know how to continue a fight, but also didn't want to apologize. Because to her, that was weakness. I didn't want to hurt you, but you did. Again and again. And every time you came back with that fake smile, I became smaller. Didn't you notice? We sat in silence, like strangers who accidentally ended up in the same house. And I suddenly realized our marriage had ended long before this conversation. I was just the last to find out. Why? I finally asked. Tell me at least one honest why. She looked up, and what I saw wasn't anger, wasn't contempt, wasn't regret. It was emptiness. A person already living a different life, only her body still sat here. Because I lost you. You became quiet, tired, without fire. I looked for life, and I found it in someone else. I nodded, without emotion, because what she said wasn't an excuse. It was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. You didn't lose me. You lost the one who was ready to give you everything. And you'll never get even a piece of him again. I stood up, not to go somewhere, but to leave. For good. She didn't shout, didn't follow me, just sat there, silent, because she knew there was nothing left to salvage. That night, I stayed at a hotel, with cheap curtains, a single bed, and weak Wi-Fi. But for the first time in many years, in silence that was mine, I heard no breathing next to me, and no betrayals in the dark, only me, and the emptiness that now belonged to me. I stared at the ceiling and thought, betrayal isn't when someone lies to you. Betrayal is when they destroy you slowly, drop by drop, with indifference, with fatigue, with lack of choice. And in that silence, in that hotel room, something inside me started to change. I no longer wanted to be someone people pitied. I wanted to become someone people respected, even if I had to learn to respect myself first. Old things, new man. By the third day after our last conversation, I found myself back at the apartment. But it wasn't home anymore, just a place where home used to be. I came only to collect my things. No illusions. No hope she'd stop me or say something meaningful, or even admit she was wrong. She was already gone from our life. Only the picture frames, the fridge magnets, and the echo of her footsteps still remembered she once belonged here. I opened the closet, and her perfume spilled out like a ghost. My hands trembled, not from anger, from memories. Every t-shirt was a scene from the past. My jacket, the trip to the mountains. The sweater, her favorite, because she said it smelled like me. She used to bury herself in it when she was cold, even when she was mad at me. And now it was just fabric, soulless. I packed my suitcase in silence. Didn't want to take everything, just the essentials, just what didn't hurt. But how do you pick through your life for the things that don't wound you? In the living room, her coffee mug sat on the table. The chipped one, The one I used to bring her coffee in bed with. She used to laugh and say it was her morning lucky charm. Now it was my proof that even the smallest objects can cut deeper than knives. She walked in as I was zipping the bag shut. Didn't stop in the doorway. Just walked past like I was an old acquaintance, someone she once knew. Her eyes held no remorse, only weariness, as if I had exhausted her with my pain, my silence, my presence. "You've decided to leave?" she asked, though she already knew. "I already left," I said. "You just didn't notice." She nodded, didn't argue, and that hurt more than if she had screamed or cried. Her indifference was the cruelest sentence. I left the keys on the table. My last ones. They didn't open the door to a home anymore, only to the past. I rented a small room in an old part of town. Crooked windows, creaky floors, a stained couch with history no bleach could fix. But she wasn't there. No laughter that no longer belonged to me. No shadow of her presence that used to tighten my chest. And in that simplicity, my transformation began. The first weeks were hollow. No joy, no plans. Just silence and insomnia. But then, something shifted. For the first time in years, I looked at myself in the mirror not as a man who was cheated on, but as one who survived. And that difference, that was my starting point. I began running in the mornings. I just ran, until my lungs burned, until the thoughts blurred, until my heart stopped whispering her name. I didn't run toward anything. I was running away. From the past. From myself. I went back to books I used to love. At night, I'd read until morning. The pages became medicine. The characters, the only ones I trusted. I began talking to people. People I hadn't heard from in years. Friends. Family. I told them the truth. No sugarcoating. No, I'm fine. And every time I said out loud what I'd been through, the pain lost a little of its grip. She'd text me sometimes. Brief. Formal. "How are you? Do you need anything?" But I never replied. Because that wasn't care. That was guilt. And I didn't need her guilt. I needed peace. One afternoon, walking past the mirrored window of a coffee shop, I saw myself and didn't recognize the man staring back. Leaner, bearded, in a sweater she had once bought me, but now it belonged to someone else. Someone new. I stood straighter. I didn't look away, didn't flinch from the reflection. That's when I knew I was no longer a shard of what she broke. I was something rebuilt, stronger, sharper. That night, I sat in my tiny rented room with a notebook. No distractions, no excuses, just pen to paper. And I wrote everything. The whole story. From the first moment I saw her, to the last second I stopped loving her. And when I finished, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't writing to remember her. I was writing to remember me. The man I used to be. There was a time when I believed being a good man meant being steady, quiet, predictable, the provider, the fixer, the one who filled the fridge, fixed the leaky faucet, remembered the anniversary, and carried the weight of everyone else's emotions while silencing his own. That's the man I used to be. But that man, he died somewhere between the silences we let grow and the lies she told while looking me in the eye. I didn't realize how much of myself I had surrendered until she was gone, or rather, until I left. I thought I was building a life with someone, but all I was really building was a version of me that could be tolerated. Less loud, less needy, less emotional, more useful, more silent, more invisible. And isn't that how it usually happens? You give and give and give until one day there's nothing left of you to offer. And still, they look at you like you're not enough. I started remembering things differently, like how she used to interrupt me when I spoke, how she laughed a little too hard when someone else made a joke, but barely smiled when I tried, how her compliments had become rarer than snowfall in July. These weren't red flags back then, just little cuts. Paper thin, easy to ignore, but enough of them. and you bleed out anyway. I wasn't the perfect husband. God knows I had my faults. But I was loyal, present. I never made her question her worth. And maybe, in a world obsessed with thrill and novelty, that wasn't enough. Maybe loyalty bored her. Maybe routine killed her fantasy. But you know what killed me? Realizing I loved someone who saw me as a backup plan, a placeholder, a man who could hold things together until something more exciting came along. I started doing something unexpected. I wrote letters to myself, not journal entries, not pity-soaked pages. Letters, honest ones, sometimes brutal, sometimes kind. Sometimes I wrote them as if I were talking to a friend I failed. Sometimes I just wrote apologies. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner. I'm sorry I kept you in that house, pretending it was love. I'm sorry I taught you to stay silent in the name of peace. And the more I wrote, the more I saw that old version of me for what he was, a good man, yes, but one who forgot that goodness does not require martyrdom. I started doing little things for myself. I signed up for cooking classes, not because I needed to cook, but because I wanted to create something with my hands that didn't feel like survival. I took long walks with no destination. Just me, the pavement, and the weight slowly lifting off my chest. I changed my wardrobe, threw out shirts that reminded me of anniversaries spent alone, burned the cologne she gave me that now smelled like betrayal, bought a new watch, a cheap one, but it ticked with a rhythm that felt like mine. And then there was the mirror, the same one I used to avoid in our bedroom. Now, every morning, I forced myself to stand in front of it, not to check if I looked good, but to meet myself again, eye to eye, man to man, without her shadow standing behind me. One evening, I ran into an old colleague, someone I hadn't seen since before the storm. He looked me up and down and said, "Man, something's changed. You look lighter, lighter, not stronger, not happier, but lighter, as if the burdens I carried for years were finally sliding off my back, as if grief had finally unclenched its fist from around my throat." I smiled and said, "I left some things behind." He didn't ask what, and I didn't need to explain. You see, the hardest part about healing isn't the pain. It's the guilt. The guilt of choosing yourself after years of choosing someone else. The guilt of closing a door you once swore to keep open forever. The guilt of moving on when a part of you still mourns the version of love you thought was real. But that guilt, it's just the echo of old loyalty. And echoes fade. So now, I carry myself differently. I speak when I want to, not when I'm allowed. I laugh loud. I cry without shame. I've learned that strength isn't silence. It's honesty, vulnerability, deciding you deserve peace, even if you have to build it alone. I'm not healed, not fully. Some nights, I still reach for a body that isn't there. Some mornings, I still brace for the sound of her voice. But those moments are fewer now, softer, like memories moving further down a quiet stream. The man I used to be, he was good. But the man I'm becoming, he's free. When the silence breaks, the silence didn't last forever. It never does. One day, it cracked, not with a bang, but with a vibration on my phone. Her name lit up the screen like a ghost I thought I'd already buried. "Can we talk?" That was it. For words. Simple, innocent on the surface. But beneath them lay months of absence, betrayal, and 1,000 unspoken truths she had once refused to face. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the reply button, not to say yes, not to say no, just paralyzed by the question itself. I didn't answer. Not immediately. I didn't know her that. That night, sleep refused to come. The darkness felt tighter, as if the air itself knew I was standing on the edge of something unresolved. She was back, not physically, but in my thoughts, in the echo of her voice that I'd spent so long trying to silence. Why now? Guilt? Loneliness? Curiosity? Or maybe she saw me rising and wondered what it was like to miss someone who finally stopped waiting. The next day, she called. I didn't pick up, not out of spite, but because I needed control. For once, I needed time to weigh whether reopening this door meant peace or relapse. When I finally agreed to meet, it was in a neutral place, a small coffee shop, the kind where no one knew our story, where I could walk away with nothing but the taste of bitter roast in my mouth and no shame on my face. She was already there when I arrived, hair neatly done, subtle makeup, that same nervous habit of stirring her coffee even when she wasn't adding anything. She looked up at me, but the power dynamic had shifted. She wasn't in control anymore. I was no longer her wounded husband. You look different, she said. I smiled slightly. I am. There was a pause. Heavy, full of every word we'd swallowed for too long. I've been thinking a lot, she began. About us. About what happened. I didn't respond. I let her speak. Let her fill the air that once used to be mine to fill. I made mistakes, she continued. I got lost. And I hurt you. I know that now. I nodded. But inside, I wondered, did she know? Did she feel it like I did? Like my chest had been carved open with a dull blade every day for months? Or was it just a polite confession to clear her conscience? I guess. I miss what we had, she said. And her voice cracked, just slightly. You were good to me. Better than I deserved. And I didn't see it. I exhaled. No, you saw it. You just didn't value it. She looked down. Her fingers trembled. A part of me felt for her. That old protective instinct still flickered somewhere deep, but I pushed it down. That part of me had bled enough. I'm not here to hurt you, she said. You already did, I replied. What else is there to say? I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to know if there's any version of us still left. There it was. The question, the reach, the grasp for something she had broken, hoping maybe, just maybe, I'd still be standing in the ruins, holding out a hand. But I wasn't. There is a version of me, I said. A better one. But it doesn't include you anymore. She blinked. Twice. A tear balanced on the edge of her lower lid, but didn't fall. You really mean that? I do. And I did. Not because I hated her, but because I finally loved myself more than I missed her. We sat in silence for a while. Her eyes scanned the cafe, looking anywhere but at me now. She realized, I think, that this wasn't a reunion. It was closure, and she hadn't expected that. I wish I could go back, she said quietly. I don't, I replied, because going back would mean losing the man I am now, and I wouldn't trade him for the illusion we used to call marriage. When I left the cafe, I didn't look back. I didn't check if she watched me go. I didn't wonder if she cried after I was gone, because none of it mattered. What mattered was the silence didn't own me anymore. I had broken it, not with words, but with truth, something like forgiveness. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It's not a light switch. It's not a single moment where pain just dissolves and love takes its place. It's a slow, grinding process, like sanding down a rough surface until it no longer cuts when you touch it. And some people expect you to forgive just because they finally decided to feel bad. But the truth is, she didn't ask for forgiveness. Not really. She wanted access to my calm, my stability, my healing. She wanted a shortcut to redemption, hoping that time had softened the edges of what she broke. But I knew better. I'd been living with the pieces. She just visited the crime scene once in a while. Still, I thought about it. Not because I owed her anything, but because I owed it to myself. To find out if the anger I carried was still protecting me, or just weighing me down. So I started small. I looked at old photos and didn't flinch. I stopped skipping songs that reminded me of her. I even passed the restaurant where I once saw her holding another man's hand. And this time, I didn't taste metal in my mouth. That was progress. I wasn't trying to erase her. That's a fool's errand. You don't forget people you built futures with. but you can choose to stop dragging them into your present. I began spending more time alone, not the lonely kind of alone, but the peaceful kind. I hiked. I took myself to breakfast on Sundays. I sat in parks and watched strangers smile at dogs, lovers argue, kids run in crooked lines across the grass. Life kept moving. And finally, I was moving with it. One morning, I saw a couple arguing by a grocery store. Nothing violent, just the kind of spat that ends with someone storming off and the other standing still, wondering what just happened. I watched the man, tall, middle-aged, in a faded baseball cap, standing there with a grocery bag in one hand and nothing but regret in his eyes. And I thought, I know you. I've been you. But I wasn't anymore. That night, I wrote another letter to myself. You did everything you could with what you knew at the time. You loved her with your whole heart, and she walked away anyway. That's not on you. But what you choose now, that is. Choose better. For you. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't profound. But it was honest. And honesty had become my oxygen. She texted again a week later. A photo of a stray cat we once fed behind our building. No message, just the image. A nostalgia grenade. But I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to keep playing the same scenes. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a decision made in the quiet when no one is watching. Sometimes it's saying, I release this to an empty room and meaning it. I didn't forgive her because she changed. I forgave her because I did. I forgave her for the lies, for the silences, for the nights she rolled over and turned away, for making me question my worth, for turning love into something I feared losing more than I enjoyed having. And most of all, I forgave myself, for staying too long, for excusing too much, for shrinking to fit inside a love that had stopped growing. That was the real freedom. It didn't come wrapped in a new relationship or some perfect ending. It didn't come with closure emails or handwritten apologies. It came slowly, through tears I didn't fight, through mornings I woke up without the weight, through one honest moment after another where I said, this is who I am now. And that man, the one she left, he's gone. I still have bad days. Some mornings, grief knocks like an old friend, asking to come in and sit a while. And I let it. I make coffee. I acknowledge it. Then I ask it to leave. Because that's the thing pain might visit, but it no longer lives here. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the fire. It's learning how to live after the smoke is cleared. The last lesson she taught me. I used to think the biggest lessons in life came from people who loved you deeply. But sometimes, the ones who hurt you the most leave behind the truths you needed the longest. She didn't mean to teach me anything. That's the irony. Her betrayal wasn't meant to guide me toward healing. It was meant to fill her emptiness. But in that reckless, selfish act, she unknowingly handed me the blueprint for my rebirth. The last lesson she taught me was this: you cannot save someone who chooses to drown with a smile. For years, I tried to rescue her. From boredom, from sadness, from herself. I played the anchor, the shore, the safe harbor. I bent until I broke, hoping if I loved her enough, she would finally stop drifting. But she didn't want to be anchored. She didn't want stability. She wanted noise, chaos, attention, the thrill of being chosen, even if she had to betray someone to feel it. And the sad truth is, some people would rather burn the house down than admit they lit the match. The moment I stopped blaming myself for her fire was the moment I stopped burning. I began reflecting not just on our relationship, but on the version of me that existed within it. He was kind, yes, loyal, devoted, but he was also afraid, terrified, really, of being alone. So afraid that he tolerated slow neglect and called it normal. He accepted crumbs and called it enough. He confused sacrifice with love. But love, real love, doesn't require you to disappear to keep someone else comfortable. She taught me that by doing the opposite. Now, when I see couples, I watch differently. I don't look for sparks. I look for respect. I look for the quiet moments, the gentle glances, the way someone listens when the other speaks, the space they give each other to be fully human. That's what I crave now. Not passion that blinds, but presence that grounds. She once told me I was too steady. I've learned that's a strength, not a flaw. Because real peace doesn't come from unpredictable highs. It comes from waking up next to someone who doesn't make you question your worth every morning. I've also learned the value of solitude. Not the kind filled with echoing silence, but the kind where you get to know yourself again. I learned that I enjoy early mornings. That black coffee suits me better than sweet lattes. That my laugh, when it's real, sounds nothing like the polite chuckles I used to force at her passive insults. I've started mentoring younger guys at work. One of them asked me recently what I thought made a man successful. I said, knowing when to walk away from what's slowly killing you. He didn't get it. Not then. But maybe one day, when he's older and standing in the ashes of something he once thought was love, he will. I don't talk about her anymore. Not with bitterness. Not with rage. Just not at all. Because what's gone doesn't deserve a starring role in what's next. That's another thing she taught me. Letting go is not a weakness, it's an art. To forgive without inviting them back. To remember without reliving. To honor what was without chaining yourself to what will never be again. I heard she moved on. Started seeing someone new. Maybe she's happy. Maybe he brings her the chaos she craves. Maybe he's better at pretending not to notice the cracks. That's none of my business. My life isn't a story about her anymore. It's a story about what happened after her. She was the storm that tore through my life. But I was the man who rebuilt, stronger, brick by brick, alone, but never lonely. And that, I think, is the last and greatest lesson she ever gave me, without meaning to, that I was always enough. She just wasn't capable of seeing it. My revenge was becoming untouchable. They say the best revenge is living well. But I'll tell you something deeper. The real revenge is no longer needing revenge at all. I used to fantasize about what I'd say if I ever got the chance. If she came crawling back. If he showed up at my door. If the world gave me a moment to deliver a perfectly crafted monologue, full of righteous anger and moral superiority. But that moment never came. And eventually, I stopped needing it to. Because what I became, quietly, slowly, painfully, was far more powerful than anything I could have said in a bitter goodbye. I became untouchable, not in the arrogant, cold, emotionless way people pretend to be after heartbreak. No, I mean I became someone they could no longer hurt. Someone who didn't flinch when her name came up. Someone who didn't stalk his social media to see if he was happier. Someone who no longer needed validation from people who couldn't even handle the weight of my loyalty. That was the revenge. To walk into a room and feel light again. To laugh and mean it. To fall asleep without replaying every word, every lie, every moment I missed the signs. The most dangerous man in the world is the one who heals. Because he doesn't destroy others, he outgrows them. I got promoted, bought a new car, traveled solo for the first time in my life, and sat on the edge of a mountain watching the sunrise, knowing no one needed to be impressed, and that felt better than applause ever did. People started noticing. Not the surface stuff, not the haircut, not the weight I'd dropped. They noticed something subtler. Peace. Quiet confidence. The way I no longer asked for anything I couldn't give myself. One day, I ran into her sister at a bookstore. We made small talk. She said, "You seem different. Happier. Like you're finally you again." And I smiled. Because she was wrong. I wasn't me again. I was someone new. Someone who had never existed before the wreckage. Someone forged in fire, but who didn't carry the burns, only the strength. That night, I passed our old apartment building. I hadn't planned to. I almost crossed the street to avoid it. Reflex, maybe. But then I stopped. Looked up at the balcony where she used to water the plants. Thought about all the nights I stood inside those walls wondering if I was losing my mind or just my marriage. And I felt nothing. No ache. No bitterness. Just stillness. That's when I knew. It was over. Not just the relationship, but the war inside me. She didn't take the best years of my life. She gave them back to me. Because what I do with them now, that's mine alone. I don't hate her. And I sure as hell don't love her. I don't wish her misery. I wish her clarity, the kind that arrives too late. The kind that wakes you up at 2 a.m. and makes you realize what you had when you had it, and who you'll never find again. I hope she meets someone who worships the ground she walks on. And I hope she ruins it, just like she did with me. Not because I want her to suffer, but because some people only learn through repetition. And some lessons come dressed as losses. As for me, I don't chase anymore. I don't beg. I don't wait for closure or apologies. I am the closure. I am the apology I never got. And I am the man I always needed to become. She gave me pain. I made it power. She handed me silence. I turned it into peace. She broke my heart. I rebuilt my soul. So no, I didn't scream. I didn't burn the photos. I didn't expose her to friends or family. I just became someone she couldn't reach, not emotionally, not spiritually, not even in memory. And that's the revenge that echoes louder than any words ever could. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in it, subscribe. Because healing isn't loud, but it's real. And it's yours. More stories like this every week. Hit that bell. Hit that freedom.